This is the class of cars that will bring you the biggest value. We cannot remove the fact that we always going to have that little factor of value in our head, hoping that maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, you will be able to resell it for the same price and sometimes a lot higher. So I think there are two things you should have in mind. So let's get into the first one. This is the demography. Although it may surprise you, this is pretty obvious. Those cars from the 50s and the 60s became valuable when the people that grew up during those years got to the age where they could buy those cars. It was basically the cars that they had on a poster in their bedroom. So we saw the Jaguar E-Types, we saw the Cobras, we saw the Aston Martin DB4, we saw all of those cars just growing in value because those cars were those dream cars from that era. So people who grew up with those naturally purchased those when they had the money to do so. So naturally, with any market, as the demand increases, the value increases as well. It became obvious over the past few years that now it's the cars from the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s that become very valuable. And the explanation is the same. People like me, who was born in the 1990s, grew up looking at those cars on posters, in magazines, and all of that. Those cars, I was dreaming about them. So naturally, someone like me who will have the funds to invest in a car for pleasure, he's going to go towards those cars. If you are watching that video and you're like me, probably around your early 30s to early 40s, you grew up with three things that probably fueled your car emotions. First one, Gran Turismo. Obviously, if you play Gran Turismo as a kid, you have some of those cars in mind, like the Castrol branded rally cars, like the Honda S2000. Those cars are probably in your mind since you first played Gran Turismo. Second, Need for Speed Underground. We stay in the video games here, but we are a generation that played video games. That's how it is. Need for Speed Underground allowed you to buy the Japanese car that you really wanted and tune it in all the ways you could, which was extremely fun for our generation. And to crown all of that, we have Fast and Furious that arrived there and put at the front of the scene even more those Japanese cars. So today we see some Toyota Supra turbos that are now worth over $100,000, which no one ever imagined it would be the case at the time they were released. The Acura NSX are getting pretty popular as well, and especially because a legend like Ayrton Senna made the TV ad. So whether we want it or not, our generation are drawn to those cars. Those were the cars from our youth. I consider myself as being kind of an old soul, so I am still more attracted by those old-timers from the 50s and the 60s. But I totally understand that today someone like me could also be really into buying a Honda S2000, a BMW E30, a Mercedes E500, all of those cars that were the automotive staples from our youth. So to summarize, think about demography. If you really want to invest in a car today while still using it, you should aim at those cars from the 2000s to this point, or even the 2010s. That brings us to the second part and the second factor, and basically what's going to be closing that series of videos. This is the class of cars that will bring you the biggest value and the biggest success in your project. There is no specific car you should buy other than the ones that you love. You need to buy what you love. This is all that matters at the end of the day. This is the only thing you have control of. If you buy something that you love, you will find all the value you want by just owning it and driving it. If you start to buy a vehicle because you think that that segment of the market is going to grow, I think you are wrong. I think you're doing things wrong, or at least the wrong way. If you don't have any emotion or any specific attachment to what you buy, you will never see the value and even the monetary value in it. you will just see a line on your spreadsheet, which in my view is not being a car enthusiast. I'm sorry to disappoint you if you're watching me, and feel free to insult me in the comments, but buying a car from the 2020s to keep it in your garage with delivery miles, I'm sorry, but to me, this is just speculation. And to this point, why bother having a big asset in your garage? Just go on the stock market and learn to trade. I just don't see the point. And even when I see those cars from the 1990s or 2000s, those Carrera GTs, those F40s, all those cars that have barely any miles, I'm just like, why? This is such a waste. Those cars are made to be driven. Those cars are made to have fun. So if you have fun with what you buy, this is going to bring you the biggest value. The rest is pure speculation. And I'll give you some examples. So let's say, as I said in the first part, you take the factor of the demography and the era from which you buy the car. Well, this is again speculation because, for instance, those Duesenbergs and everything are always going to be the classics of the classics. So they're always going to be carrying a big value, despite it being more than 100 years old. Now those cars from the 50s and 60s that became legends in the post-war world, whether it's some Ford GT40s, the 250 GTO, the 300 SL Gullwing, all of those cars are still going to be the classics of the classics. And even though their value may be fading out because of the demography, they will still carry a big value because they are legends. As an example, let's take the Aston Martin DB5. This is the James Bond car, and this will always be. So it's always going to be carrying a super good value. And thinking like that, you could be like, why don't BMW Z3s are not being more expensive? It was a James Bond car as well. It's a pretty nice car. It's from the late 1990s. It could be super valuable. And in the end, you look at their values and they are still super cheap. So again, this is all speculation. Now, another big factor is the number of examples that were built, and if it was a limited edition. Again, this is pure speculation. To give you an example, let's look at the 300 SL, whether it's the Gullwing or whether it's the Roadster. We can consider that the value lands probably around $1.3 and $1.8 million. There were over 3,000 examples built. In today's standards, it's not huge. But if we take a car from the same era that carry the same kind of value today, we can take the Ferrari 250 GT Lusso. That car was just produced at 350 examples. So at the end of the day, an example that is one of 3,000 is the same value as an example that is 1 out of 350. So again, the production number is going to be about speculation. Some limited edition things didn't work. That's just what it is. Another very important example in my view. Let's take the example of the Series 1 E-Type, which is an example I took in the first video of that series. The Series 1 E-Type Roadster is much more valuable than the Series 1 E-Type Coupe. You see where I'm going with that? There were more Roadsters built than Coupes. And as of today, the Roadsters are more valuable. So again, the production number doesn't change anything. So at the end of the day, the biggest value you can have is the pleasure. This is the only value that should matter when you're buying a car for pleasure. I am working on making a video about some of the cars I know that I think can bring you a lot of pleasure and may grow in value in the next 5 to 10 years. I can tell you that the TJ Wrangler has all of the cards to become something kind of valuable. When you look at the Ford Broncos, at the Toyota AMGs, at the Defenders, those cars don't have much more nice things than a TJ has. So why a TJ in maybe 20 years not going to be carrying the same kind of value that Broncos have today? A Mazda Miata NA, if you find a very, very clean one, this is a pretty cheap purchase for something that will always be kind of fun. Is it ever going to be super valuable? Probably not. But in the meantime, you will have so much pleasure driving it that if you maintain it properly, I would think that in 20 years, you will be able to sell it at the same price. And if I have to give another example, and I think I'm going to be killed with this one, I would say buy a Porsche 911 996 or a Boxster. We already see that some of them are getting more and more valuable. It's all about how clean you will be buying that car. If you buy a super clean Porsche Boxster S with a nice color, I can probably safely tell you that in 10 years, you will not be losing money on it. And if there has to be a wild card in all of that, I would buy a Series 1 Porsche Cayenne. Again, this is a pretty cheap purchase, but if you buy one that is maybe one owner, that has a nice color scheme, that has been well maintained and everything, there are already a good number of collectors talking about the Series 1 Cayenne. They started the SUV segment for Porsche. This is going to be something important in the next 15 to 20 years. All of those cars that I mentioned are, in my view, cars that are very fun to drive and that will bring you a lot of pleasure without spending crazy amount of money. And at the end of the day, the thing you should keep in mind is that if you are being attracted by a car, if you're enthusiastic about a car and you want to drive it and you want to take it out and have fun with it, there is a big chance that you are not the only one. And this is how a car becomes desirable. If you already own a great example from that category of cars, and down the line you will have something that you enjoyed a lot, that you took very good care of, and that will be desirable in the eyes of other people that want that specific car. So I'm telling it for one last time. The only drive you should have in your brain is pleasure. You have to buy something that will make you want to take your wife or husband out to dinner in the evenings. You have to buy something that you want to put your kids in and show them what being a car enthusiast is all about. This is gonna give you the biggest value. Trust me. So anyways, that's all I wanted to tell you. I hope this is again gonna be a good help for you if you're looking to buy a car for pleasure, if you're looking into maybe buying 2, 3, 4 cars for pleasure that you would prefer keeping as assets than as a cash in a bank account. I hope this helped you in some ways. Please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments if it's the case, and also if it's not the case. Share your experience if you had some good experience or bad experiences with owning those cars or whatever. And I will see you on the next one.